Islamic State terror video that appears to renew a threat against New York City. As we learn that less than a week after they attacked Paris, Islamic terrorists were already gearing up for a second attack in the City of Lights, which French security teams stopped last night in a dramatic shootout. There are a lot of breaking news tonight on the Kelly File. Welcome, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. Just a couple of hours ago, the Islamic State terror group went up with a video that included praise for the attackers in Paris and then seemed to suggest a suicide bomb plot for Times Square, just 2 blocks from the studio from which we bring you this show. The viral video shows several men, some speaking Arabic, some speaking French, congratulating ISIS for the success of the French attacks, and then shows some images the group released back in April, images which include pictures of Times Square and of a man seeming to arm himself with a suicide vest. The NYPD has released a statement tonight saying it is aware of the video, that it suggests New York City remains a top terror target, and it also says it is deploying additional response teams around the city out of an abundance of caution. Remember, Times Square was the target of a bombing at the military recruiting center back in March of 2008. No one was hurt. No one was ever caught. 2 years later, Faisal Shahzad constructed a car bomb and drove it to the heart of the city. He said he was trying to avenge U.S. military intervention in Muslim countries. He's now serving a life sentence for his attempt on Times Square. And of course, this city was the site of the most devastating terror attack in U.S. history when it lost 2,753 on September 11th, 2001. All of this comes roughly 12 hours after a violent raid in a suburb of Paris where more than 100 officers engaged terror suspects, at least one of whom had wrapped herself in explosives, police believe, in a gun battle so fierce it is hard to describe. The terrorists involved reportedly had plans to attack the Paris airport and a busy shopping mall. Here is just a little of what was caught on camera. On that one video, the gunfire goes on nonstop for another full minute. When the shooting and the explosions were done, the building where the suspects were hiding out had to be propped up so it would not collapse from the damage. Now, this location is just 10 minutes from the stadium that was attacked last Friday. We're told police found a cell phone from one of the terrorists at the stadium and used it to discover this apartment building. At one point, a woman with long blonde hair appeared in a window crying for help. Police told her to raise her hands. She stepped back. They opened fire. Moments later, a massive blast rocked the block, and now they believe that woman was strapped with a suicide bomb vest and was trying to draw police closer before blowing herself up. 6 hours after the raid began last night, it was over. 2 people were dead, 7 suspects were in custody, 5 officers were injured. A police dog was also killed. And what they found inside suggested that the terrorists had another attack in mind, one with the potential to be as deadly as what we saw last week. Dr. Sebastian Gorka, a counterterror instructor for the FBI and U.S. Special Forces, will be here in a moment. Plus, Rick Leventhal has new reporting on the so-called ringleader of these terrorists in Paris. But first, the very latest on the terror plots broken up just hours ago in France. For that, we turn to Jake Wallace-Simons, Associate Global Editor for DailyMail.com, who is live in Paris after spending the day covering this raid. Jake, thank you for being here. What can you tell us about this woman?
Well, Megyn, first, thank you so much for having me on tonight. I've been speaking to eyewitnesses at Saint-Denis, the district of Paris where this attack happened, and I've learned lots about this woman. We think that she is the cousin of the ringleader, Abdelhamid Abaoud. We know that she had appeared to have long blonde hair, and as you mentioned in your segment just now, that she was calling for help before she appeared to detonate her suicide vest. However, I spoke to somebody who told me that he actually saw her the day before she was killed at about 3:30 in the afternoon, emerging from the apartment where the terrorists were holed up and going to a KFC to get some food and bring it back for her comrades. And he described her as having dark hair, dark frizzy hair. He said that she looked somewhat Brazilian in terms of her features. She was wearing a denim jacket and jeans and a white scarf, and that she seemed very relaxed and nonchalant, as if she didn't have any care in the world, very ordinary, just going to pick up some food for her friends. And we know that within a few hours of that time, she was dead.
What can you tell us about the neighborhood in which these terror suspects were hiding out?
Well, the neighborhood is a poor and deprived area of Paris. I spoke to some local officials and people on the local council there, and some of the women members of the council said that they would never dare to walk in that neighborhood after dark. This is somewhere where violent crime is common, petty crime is common. In fact, when I spoke to some of the residents, they said that when they heard the shooting and saw the police on the streets, they were not particularly surprised because they're used to that kind of thing in that neighborhood. There's a large Muslim population and a growing problem with radicalization recently. During the war in Gaza, the most recent war in Gaza, there were riots on the streets where the youth took to the streets and attacked police officers. And in fact, when the police yesterday were searching a church as part of their investigation, one young man of Arabic descent shouted at them, "You would never dare to do that to a mosque." So this is the sort of environment that locality has, and clearly it's one in which terrorism can easily flourish.
Certainly is. Jake, thank you. We are also told that the landlord said he was letting the people in that flat stay there for free, and it was just a favor he was doing, and he's now in police custody. There was reporting earlier today that the ringleader of the Paris attacks was killed in this overnight raid, but the French will not confirm that, nor will they say who is in custody and who is dead. Rick Leventhal is live in Paris tonight. He has been digging into the story of the most wanted man in the world right now. Rick?
And Megan, most Americans have probably never heard of Abdelhamid Aboud, but he is Belgium's most famous jihadi, in part because he recruited his 13-year-old little brother to come to Syria with him and fight for ISIS. He's also known as one of ISIS's most prolific executioners and was responsible for planning multiple failed terror attacks, including that Paris-bound train plot that was foiled by those 3 American heroes back in August. He's the son of a Moroccan shopkeeper. He was a student of an upscale school in Brussels, but morphed into an extremely professional commando, according to the Belgian justice minister, when he was radicalized in prison where he served time for petty crimes. And he reportedly became close to the Abdeslam brothers in the Molenbeek neighborhood, which is known for cultivating and harboring radical extremists. 2 of those brothers, as you know, were part of the Paris attacks. One is dead, and the other is now on the run. Aboud became known as a radical Muslim combatant in February 2014 when he was filmed smiling at the wheel of a pickup truck while dragging bodies from a mass execution. And he was so hated back home that his own family celebrated when they heard that he might have been killed fighting in Syria. According to the New York Times, they had come to despise him and prayed that the news was true. Instead, he was crisscrossing Europe from Athens to Brussels to Syria and back, and wound up in Paris coordinating the worst attack on French soil since World War II. Now, Megan, his reign of terror may be over, but we're still waiting for confirmation that he was killed in this morning's raid.
Rick, thank you. Well, our next guest says Paris should be a wake-up call for every American, and that we should be ready to challenge things that look out of the ordinary, because we cannot wait for the police or the feds. Joining me now, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. He is the chair of military theory at the Marine Corps University, and he also served as a prosecution expert in the Boston bombing trial. He also runs the GorkaBriefing.com. Dr. Gorka, thank you for being here tonight. So your position right now is that Paris is just the beginning, and we need to rely on ourselves. What do you mean by that?
Well, if you look at what's happened since the attacks on Friday, Megyn, it is clear that this wasn't just some spontaneous event done by people who had a grudge. This is organized. This is a network. This is international. This woman, if the reports are true, tried to entice the police closer to that house so she could kill them with an explosive device that had been prepared for this eventuality. So the message is very clear, Megyn. The jihad is real, the jihad is global, and they want to bring it to the shores of America. We have an article coming out in tomorrow's New York Post where we give you the stats. We've had 82 ISIS suspects arrested in America in a 20-month period, and of those, a full 30% had no intention of going to Iraq or to Syria to fight. They had decided to kill Americans on U.S. soil. As a result, don't wait for Uncle Sam to protect you. Every American has a duty and a responsibility to be aware of the threat and be prepared to protect themselves.
But what does that mean? I mean, there's no reasoning with these people. On Friday night, as the terror attack was unfolding, and we heard that there were up to 100 hostages taken in that concert hall, one of the first guests we tried to book was a hostage negotiator. And of course, that was ridiculous because there's no negotiating with these people. They just killed them. They killed them all. If they couldn't escape, they were dead. So how are Americans supposed to think about protecting themselves?
Okay, so you're the first point, absolutely right. You don't negotiate with people who want to destroy you. That would be like negotiating with Hitler. No, you have to be tactically aware. If you're in a state, if you're in a municipality that allows you to carry a weapon, you should do so. You should get training. You should carry it. Your members of your family that are prepared to do so, likewise. But on top of that, even more important than that, is you have to have tactical awareness. I grew up in the UK during the deadliest years of the IRA. Everybody was alert all the time. If somebody put a bag down for a moment on a tube train, on the subway, on a bus, within 60 seconds, a school kid, a grandmother would say, "Whose is that bag?" And if nobody replied, that bus would be stopped, it would be evacuated, and the police would be called. Do we have that mentality today in America? I'm not sure.
How determined do you believe they are right now to launch an attack in America? In other words, does it make it more likely, since they've just had, quote, success in Paris, or is it more likely that they'll lie low for a bit until the heat is less severe?
I think if you read the magazine of ISIS, so ISIS has an English language jihadi magazine called Dabiq, and your watchers can check it out, D-A-B-I-Q. It's their manual of jihad. It is clear, explicit, every issue. They want to take the war to America. I believe we have sleeper cells here already. Director Comey has said there are upwards of 900 investigations going on in all 50 states. So I would expect them to be encouraged by this event because it was successful. This is the largest targeting of civilians on French soil since the end of World War II. So this will be an encouragement to jihadis in America.
Dr. Gorka, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Megyn, for having me.
Coming up, the investigation into last week's Paris attacks turns to Belgium. And we will have a live report from a place described as one of the worst breeding grounds for jihadists in all of Europe, and his home. Plus, ISIS is bragging about downing that Russian passenger jet and claiming they almost went after an American ally. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is next with the very latest on that. And House Homeland Security Chairman Michael McCaul is here on fears of a terror attack here in the United States. And then in the wake of